Housebound is a low-budget New Zealand horror comedy, and it manages to pull off a couple of really awesome things. Kylie, a drug addict turned ATM robber, gets put under house arrest after a botched crime. Stuck with her insufferable mum and silent stepdad, she begins to suspect that something evil may be haunting her house, and her security guard Amos gets involved with her attempts to discover the truth. On its own, that's a pretty good idea for a movie, but what's cool about Housebound is that it pulls off one or two really rare tricks. Firstly, it's a true mixture of horror and comedy. Think about how Shaun of the Dead is sort of a bit of a rom-com setup / buddy comedy, just with the dressing of being a zombie film. Housebound manages to pull off an equal mixture of both. There are some really good scare sequences in it, and the ending actually took me by surprise. It wasn't exactly what I thought was going to pan out. But in the middle of a really scary sequence, they'll often have these really broad jokes, really like funny stuff going on. So instead of being more horror or more comedy, it's pretty much split directly down the middle with dumb jokes and scare sequences side by side. It's really difficult to pull that off because it's a real mixture of tones, but the director, Gerald Johnstone, really succeeds here. The other interesting thing about Housebound is that its protagonist is pretty unlikable for most of the movie. To an extent, she's sympathetic because you know that her mum is kind of insufferable. She's like a proper mumsy kind of figure. And for this bank robbing meth addict to come back home to that, it's completely stifling for her. So you can understand her frustration, but they take their time really making her likable. So it really flies in the face of the, I think, quite mistaken idea that you have to have a likable protagonist for a movie to succeed. And although the screenplay is great, this is pretty much up to Morgana O'Reilly, who plays Kylie. She puts in a great performance. She's able to kind of hit the emotional beats that her character needs for the horror parts to make sense, and still have a broad enough range in her play to be able to make the comedy elements really come out. If there's any flaws of the movie, it's not very visually inventive, and it does take some of its cues from other horrors like The People Under the Stairs. But it's very low budget, so you can forgive a lot of the problems with it aesthetically, and even then they manage to pull off some really nice sets, including like the basement where a lot of the action happens is a really nice looking set. It's also the director's first film, which is kind of a huge achievement because it's a really self-assured, well-made movie. And some of the lack of visual inventiveness in a way is almost kind of nice to have there, because usually with someone's first film they go all over the place with the way that they shoot it to make it look kind of crazy so they feel like they're stamping their mark on it. And he manages to avoid that here completely. He has made a lot of TV as well, so he's not completely new to it, but for a first movie it is like quite astounding, really, quite a good achievement. So overall, this is a really underrated movie, and it's definitely one of the best horror comedies I've seen. It's available now on Netflix, so I highly recommend going over there and supporting them. And keep an eye out for Gerald Johnstone and for Morgana O'Reilly and see what they're coming out in next. Because if they're as good in that as they are in this, then it's going to be a treat. That's all from me for this week. See you next time. Have a good one.